Hello, and welcome to the Guilbault Girls Show, where you will have the opportunity to hear from mothers, fathers, siblings, and individuals themselves about their journey of living with a disability. I know, it's called Guilbault Girls, but we have a bonus for you as we get the Guilbault boys to interview some of the dads and siblings and get their perspectives too. We'll also have special guests from time to time to share the many resources that are available to those living with a disability and their families. So get ready to laugh, smile, cry, maybe even get a little angry when you hear some of these stories of their day-to-day struggles. But let's not forget their many triumphs. As they say, it takes a village. And if it weren't for our village, we wouldn't be where we are today. So join us. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Guilbault Girls Show. I'm your host, Karen Guilbault, and today's guest is Angela Sittler. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Angela is the Family Supports Manager at the Arc Northern Chesapeake Region and mom of two boys who both have different abilities. Angela worked in the Maryland Office for Genetic and People with Special Health Care Needs since 2011 as the Family Resource Coordinator, until she joined the Arc Northern Chesapeake Region, NCR, in April 2021 as the Family Supports Manager. She received her master's degree in health science from Towson University in 2018. She has served families on her local SECAC, which is Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, the Mount Washington Pediatric Hospital Family Advisory Council, and as a past member of the Maryland Caregivers Commission. In her free time, which I don't know how you have any, she volunteers with the local fire department. I think the most important role that Angela serves is being a mom of her two boys. So Jake is 19 and he has a rare syndrome. And how do you pronounce that?
Au-Kline Syndrome.
Au-Kline Syndrome. And John, who's almost 22, who has Asperger's, ADHD, and anxiety. So welcome, Angela. I'm excited to have you on the show finally.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I can't wait.
Yeah. So for the listeners, I am friends with Angela. I'm proud to call her my friend. And we also used to be coworkers. She is amazing. So we have so much to talk about between your lived experiences with both of your boys, all of your involvement with the different councils and boards and everything else that you've served on. So what your role is at the Arc NCR and what their family support services offers. So everybody be patient, stay tuned, because we're going to actually put these into two different episodes, with the first one focusing on you being a mom to your two boys. So let's start. Let's talk about your pregnancy. So let's start with John, your firstborn. How was your pregnancy with him? Did you have any complications, or was it pretty much your typical pregnancy?
I mean, it's a typical first pregnancy, the normal aches and pains and stress and worry because, it's your first and you're scared, crapless. So it was fine. He actually came exactly on the due date.
Oh, wow.
Not early, not late, exactly on my due date, which is unheard of in that aspect. But
yeah, absolutely. And at what age did you start to notice some of the signs or symptoms that he had Asperger's? And I also know that you said he has ADHD and anxiety too. So how did and does that play into one another?
Well, we got the ADHD and anxiety diagnoses before Asperger's, because as you as listeners know, the Asperger's generally doesn't get diagnosed a little bit older because as the social cues and social pressures get higher, it gets kicked in. We kind of noticed something was off because he did everything a little bit on the late side. Like he didn't talk till he was 2. He didn't walk till he was 18 and a half months, and 19 months is when they actually throw you into infant toddler. So he walked. I mean, he walked and then ran. Like there was no let's walk for a few days. No, it was all of a sudden he decided, yeah, I'm going to go. Same thing with talking. He said like 1 or 2 words, then sentences came out. Which is kind of, I look back, I'm like, that should have been the indicator that something else was going on. He was an infant and toddlers because of the delayed speech.
Okay.
And then some of his fine motor skills, he didn't like sticky and some things like that. So initially, they just kind of called it developmental delay, not otherwise specified, or PDD NOS.
So as a new mom, you're finally getting this diagnosis. Okay, now what? Walk us through some of those next steps that you had to take in order to help him get him the supports that he needed.
Well, like I mentioned, we were infant and toddlers. So they kind of came in. We had an infant teacher come in and kind of work with him, if I remember, because it was a little while ago.
Time ago.
I'm yeah. I want to say it was once a week, but don't quote me on how much that was, because again, it was a long time ago. She would come in and just work with him. The speech therapist came in a little less frequently, and she taught me and taught us how to do some sign language to decrease some of that frustration he was getting when he wasn't talking. And it was basic: more, eat, please. There's basic ones that he could kind of get what he wanted across without a meltdown. And the teacher kind of just showed us how to teach during play, that kind of what he thinks we're playing, but really teaching, fine motor skills and things like that. He didn't really quite, at pre-K, because his birthday was in September. So he missed, I was back when they were moving kindergarten, all the dates back to September 1st.
Yes.
So we got him into the local high school, had that child development class. So we got him into that as a lieu of, because he was too young for preschool. So we got him in that before we got actually into the pre-K 3, which technically he was 4, but in the school system, and that's how he did it from there. So he went to pre-K 4, and he had an IEP in school, and it was just for the at that point it was just for the fine motor,
okay,
the cutting and the handwriting and that kind of stuff.
So how did he transition? How did he do with that, from elementary to middle to high school years, both academically and socially?
Miserable. It was absolutely miserable. He got the anxiety diagnosis and ADHD, I believe it was 1st or 2nd grade. And initially it was really funny because they called it, I guess not really, but anxiety, ADHD with autistic-like traits. I'm like, can we call it what it is? Like, we don't want to give him a label. Yes, but sometimes it kind of helps. So I was like, whatever. But when he's in 3rd grade, we moved, so he had to go to a new school for 4th and 5th.
Okay.
He still had pretty decent grades. I mean, he was gifted and talented for math. And he did, but his bad side was spelling and reading. He was just not there. The whole reading comprehension, just he couldn't, and that's hallmark of Asperger's and autism. We could read a passage, he could tell you exactly what it was about, but if you said, well, why do you think the author might have made that whole room blue? Because he liked the color, Mom. What they're really getting at was the author's trying to portray sad, and he couldn't quite get that. And he had a lot of trouble with that. And then the transition to middle school's hell anyway. It just, whether you have an issue or not, it's just ridiculous. And he was bullied really badly in middle school. And he was actually admitted to the psych ward twice for suicide attempts. And because he was the quiet, when he had behavior issues, he would just shut down and not do anything. Well, in the school he was at, there was a lot more children that had more behavioral needs. So they would act out. They got the attention. They got the IEP supports. They got that. And because he wasn't a problem child, he got swept under the radar. So we had to fight and call in advocates to get an IEP in his 8th grade, get the IEP back, because they got rid of it because he was doing so well.
Wow.
And then he got it in 8th grade. And right before he went to high school, is when we finally got it. We didn't like it, but we figured, you know what? We'll just go to high school and we'll fix it there. He did better in high school. His grades were just crap, complete crap. Because he was just the anxiety was the worst. He would just why do I need Spanish? I don't need it. I'm just not going to do it. And that was his philosophy. He knew it. He just didn't feel like doing it.
Right.
And this was during the time when in our school system, they said, you know what? We're not going to grade homework. You shouldn't have to grade homework, so you can't count it against the kids. So he never did his homework anymore, which is, I think, the worst decision they did. But that's a whole other podcast decision on academics. He made it through. I don't know how he graduated. He was a class of 2020. So the last 6 months of his school, he was virtual, and that was a godsend for him. If they had had that option early on, I think he would have thrived a lot better.
And how did he make out and get through coping with everything, after being admitted to the psych ward? How old was he when that happened?
I want to say the first time was 7th grade. So 12, 11, something like that. He did fine. We got a lot of behavior supports put in. We got into PRP, which is the psychiatric rehabilitation programs. They come in and kind of do the behavior supports in the house, and got him the behavior people that work in the school system and outside, and kind of got some of that stuff to work on it. A lot of it was adjusting meds, but because of anxiety, and he was going through puberty, it's like hitting a moving target.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, you all remember puberty, it's miserable to begin with. Then you add on, some kind of neuro difference, and it just kind of throws it out of the water.
And what were some of his highlights? And what did he have certain hobbies that he liked growing up?
It changed. He was always been the kid, like to stay, hang out by himself, play by himself. He could care less if he had friends. He did try chess club for a little while in school, and we learned. He actually taught me how to play. So that was kind of one of the things to help calm him down, was to play chess, because he could 9 times of the time he could beat me, because I'm just not that good at chess. So that was, and family game nights kind of like calm him down, those kind of things. But he very much is, he's my little nerdling, and I say that with love because so am I. We're sci-fi.
Yeah.
So he likes watching some of those shows and getting into some of that kind of stuff. He really does like computers. For a while he wanted to get into video production, and he did a lot of that in high school and stuff like that. So that was kind of what he went into. He's changed now, but then don't we all, when you leave high school, you change your mind and decide a whole different career path, which is fine.
Yeah. So what is he doing today as a soon-to-be 22-year-old, and what are his goals for the future?
Right now, he's still working at a local shop, just kind of trying to find himself, I guess. He had to put in to become a correctional officer.
Okay.
For Harford County. So I'm kind of excited and a little nervous, I'll admit, but it's a good opportunity for him to get into a government job, and he really is that very black and white law and order. So I think that would be good for him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see him being a sheriff because of the anxiety, and some of that piece probably wouldn't work well, but the CEO, a controlled-ish environment, I think is better. He still has some ideas of making his own business, which I'm supportive, but he needs to follow through. And, with ADHD, that's not exactly his strong suit, because he really does care tremendously about the differing ability world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he can pick on his brother to no end, but nobody else better. I'm sure you know that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he was looking at, because he's really good with IT and doing those kinds of things, of making some kind of program we can go out to seniors and those with a disability and go out and help them like figure out their email or figure out this kind of stuff and go like that. So he's looking at trying to do a business model for that.
That's awesome. So so I do want to see, we'll have to get with him and see if he would be willing to.
I asked him and he's too shy. He said,
nope. That's fine. That's fine. There are a lot of people
talk about him. I can talk about him, but he does not want to go on. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
Which is fine. Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive into Jake. Can you share with the listeners what his disability is, when he was diagnosed, and how it affects him?
All right. Well, it's Au-Kline Syndrome, which is AU-KLINE. It's two doctors' names put together, the two that actually found it. Okay. That's Dr. Billy Au and Anthony Klein. That's how the name came about. We knew at birth that something was obviously different. He had some sort of genetic syndrome. We just didn't know what, because he didn't fit into any mold. So he was born 2 weeks early at 8 pounds. So he was a nice, healthy size. So, and it was evident at birth. He had hip dislocation. He had an extra finger. He was floppier than a normal baby would be. I mean, newborns are floppy. This was like extra floppy. I don't know how else the better way to describe it. The plates in his skull bones were still moving and kind of overlapping. They really weren't like a newborn. He was a vaginal birth still, but even so, they're still more like they weren't quite normal.
Okay. And
his toes overlapped, kind of almost like that. I don't know how else to describe that for those that aren't watching this cast. They kind of overlapped is the best way to describe it. He had, a lot of other little things in there, hydronephrosis or water on the kidney. His testes were completely undescended, things like that. So of course he was in the NICU. He was there's double photo lights because he was so jaundiced. Mm-hmm. He was in there for about a week, 10 days. 10 days, because he had to get some IV antibiotics because they couldn't tell, was he getting pneumonia, was it the low tone? They couldn't tell, so they just did the antibiotics. And when you're in the NICU, as I'm pretty sure you're aware, every doctor and their brother comes in to examine. And that's when I started finding other things, his heart valve issue, which is a bicuspid aortic valve. His eyes was all kinds of like little tiny things, that most of which he's outgrown. So there was no set diagnosis. They reran the chromosomes, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, his geneticist, Dr. Klein, is the only doctor he's had from birth until now, which is kind of, kind of cool. I don't plan on getting rid of her. She's not allowed to retire. So we did, we got sent him from the NICU with all these follow-ups and said, here, we don't know what's wrong with him, but just treat him like a normal baby, which was impossible because he didn't act like a normal baby. He couldn't really suck that well. So he was at 8 pounds at birth, and 3 months later, he'd only gained 3 pounds.
Oh, wow.
He was never awake. He slept through the night as soon as I brought him home because he didn't have that hunger cue.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was just a lot of was going to the doctors over the years. We didn't get the Au-Kline diagnosis until he was 11, I think.
Wow, that long.
Because science hadn't caught up. We finally got into the Hopkins was running a human genome project where they go and they look at your entire DNA and they take DNA from mom and dad to make sure, because there's normal variants and want to make sure they roll them out. And they found one that wasn't either one of us, but they didn't know what that gene did. They go, well, this could be it, but we're not sure. Can we have your permission to put it in this gene mapping database that goes around the world? So if anybody else has something like this, it'll ping. So we did. And then someone in Canada, that Dr. Billy Au, had a young man, a little older than Jake, that had the exact same gene malformation. And they got together and they had the same symptoms, and thus Au-Kline was born.
So how many there are to date around?
Not officially, because not everybody contacts the doctors, but we think worldwide there's probably maybe 50, 60.
Wow.
Yeah. It's growing because now that they know the gene is, they can test for it at birth. So now we're finding children much younger now. As soon as they were born and have sure symptoms, they can test them. Not that we can do anything about it, but at least they get on our Facebook group and go, hey, make sure when you go to urology, you ask for this, this, and this, and these kind of things. So we can kind of help the younger parents out and check for these kind of things. But this syndrome, it is kind of a spectrum. Most of them have some kind of cardiac. Jake is more on the GI system.
Okay.
But there's everything in between. They all have some sort of intellectual disability, ranging from severe to mild, speech issues, low muscle tone, cardiac, like I said, orthopedic issues of some sort. Scoliosis is at least 75% of them have scoliosis, some needing surgery at 5 and 6 years old. So pretty young. They all have urological issues. So they don't really know they still don't know what the gene does, but they can tell you if this gene is malformed, these are kind of symptoms. So they're still doing a lot of studies and things like that on it.
Yeah. So walk us through what a typical day looks like for both you and Jake as far as his medical needs are concerned.
All right. Well, we'll start in the morning. We get him up, and if it's not a school day, school day is a whole other, we got to get up early, things are rushing. But he sleeps with a BiPAP on, like a little nose pill, like you see CPAP people who snore. His is just BiPAP, a little more support.
Okay.
So we take that off. We disconnect him from his TPN, which is the total parenteral nutrition, through a central line. It runs overnight. And we disconnect him from his, because he has a neurogenic bladder. So he can't pee on his own. So we cath him. But overnight, I am not getting up every 3 hours. I'm past that stage in my life. So we tape in a bag and just drain it overnight and empty it in the morning.
Okay.
Because I need to sleep. Sleep is important. Self-care. So, take all that off. We have to get him dressed, change his diaper, put a fresh one on, because he's still incontinent of everything. And then we get him dressed. He uses a walker. I have to brush his teeth, the hair. He's pretty much total care and all that. He can help a little bit. He wears ankle braces. He has a ton of meds we give in the morning. He takes them with applesauce, luckily. And then we make his 2 feet again, because he gets that through his, he's got lots of holes. He has a J tube on his, which is right in your jejunum, in your intestines, that he gets fed through. Right now it's 20 hours a day. He has a G tube, which is on his stomach, which we drain his stomach contents out because his intestines don't move right. So we have to drain. If it sits in his stomach, he'll just throw it out.
Okay.
So he has a drain bag on almost 24. We turn it off and give him meds just for it to absorb a little bit. And then he has a cecostomy tube, which is in his, if you imagine with the intestines, I should have brought a picture. I didn't think about that. But it's right where the large intestine starts is where this tube goes. And we flush water in it at night, like around 5 or 6, and it makes him poop because his intestines don't really
move
do that peristalsis.
Okay.
So we have that.
And what's the TPN again? What is
total parenteral nutrition? It's basically he's feeding all his nutrients, his fats, his lipids, vitamins, fluids through that line.
Okay.
He's got a Hickman, actually on his right side. I'm looking at the mirror image of myself. And it goes in from under his shoulder blade. It's tunneled up under his skin and goes into his right atrium, and he's fed directly into there with a pump. And he's at 11 hours a day of that. And we mainly do it overnight. There's one less thing he has to carry around with him.
Right.
And that's because we can't get his 2 feet up to normal to sustain himself. We're working on trying to wean one and increase the other.
Okay.
But once he uses a walker in the house, anything more than that, we use a wheelchair. He used to be independent walking, but that's probably a question for another day of why we regressed. So working on all that, he likes to watch his iPad. I'm just monitoring him the rest of the day, and he gets it out of the car. He likes to go shopping. Well, pet shopping and toy shopping, not like, clothes shopping. He's a boy. I mean, he doesn't like any of that. And then at night, it's just everything in reverse. It's just doing everything for him.
Right. Yeah.
And just monitoring him and keeping up all the supplies and.
Yeah, which is a lot. And all your doctor's appointments, because I'm sure see a gazillion specialists. And
pretty much every specialist that's out there. Yeah.
So I know he's had many surgeries and setbacks over the years. And of course the boy just keeps on going and going and never gives up because he gets that from his mama. Can you share with us some of those experiences? And then on the flip side, share some of the triumphs, because, he's come a long way.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't think he would live past his first birthday. He's 19. So obviously they were wrong, way wrong. We like to joke that there's a book on kids with different abilities or with his different issues, but he just forgot to read it. So he does what he wants. So, that's just Jake. But he's had multiple surgeries, like you said, and he's the one that if it's a 1% chance of this thing going wrong, it will.
He gets it.
So we just kind of plan for that, and that's just how we get through. The biggest setback, I think, for him was during the pandemic. Of course, schools were closed, so he didn't get that PT that he normally gets. And he wasn't walking around a school building. He was sitting on a couch, going from the couch to the table, because obviously my house is not as big as the school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the summer, we couldn't walk around because he doesn't sweat. So we couldn't really walk outside. So he really lost a ton of mobility. And then it also scoliosis. We don't know if it's because of loss of mobility or just because of we don't really know. It increased a ton. We had to have his back surgery. And we had the back surgery in 2023, right? So 2022. It's been a year.
Okay.
It's been a year. And we had some complications in surgery. Well, actually, we didn't. He had the complications. And he came out with intestines not working. And that's when we went on the TPN. We haven't been able to get them back online since that surgery. But he's walking a year out. He's almost back to independent walking.
That's great.
I say almost, but come a long way. He's
Right.
able to do a lot more. He's starting to stand. It's more of a psychological thing now. He's scared because he doesn't want to fall. I get that.
Yeah.
But he's had a lot of those. He does not, like you said, he's on the go. He runs with the adapted running group. He's run marathons, triathlons, 5Ks, any of those kind of things. He loves it with adapted running. He does adapted baseball through the rec, county rec. And then in school, he does what they call allied sports. So it's bocce ball in the fall. No. Soccer in the fall, bocce ball in the winter, and softball in the spring.
Okay. They do bowling too?
Not anymore. Bocce ball took place of bowling.
Okay.
I don't know why. I was like, whatever. But he loves doing all that. They do, they go out and they run out of their, because in a self-contained classroom, they run a coffee shop that the teachers and staff can go to. And they got to take the order and they deliver to the teacher's classroom and things. He loves doing that.
That's awesome.
Now, it's not like a full service Starbucks thing. We're talking to
Right.
Keurig and they got like,
But still,
but yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yes, he loves doing that. He's pretty active in our church. They have friends worship where it's anyone high school and older with some kind of differing ability, usually cognitive. And they have their own service while us, we go to our regular one. They have meet and greets. I think they do quarterly. They go hang out with no parents.
What church do you go to?
The Grace Fellowship in Timonium.
Okay. Oh, in Timonium. Okay.
Mm-hmm. They have a huge disability ministry.
Okay.
And Jake just loves it, and they have it virtual. We started going before the pandemic, and they switched to virtual, of course, which was a godsend because the whole time he was in the hospital for months. he was able to attend church every Sunday because he could go virtually and connect. Yeah. And they still have it virtual. So we have that option now when it's too hot or he's not feeling up to par, he can attend virtually.
That's awesome.
Which is nice.
How would you describe Jake's personality and tell us what some of his, well, we already know what some of hobbies are, but him and that smirk and the girls and.
Oh my goodness. He is such a player. He has girlfriends, multiple girlfriends. If you ask him, he loves the ladies. He's a boob man. Definitely is that. If you ask him, he loves sports. He loves the Ravens and he loves the Orioles. If you ask him who his favorite Ravens player is, he'll tell you the girls, meaning the cheerleaders. He very much, he's usually, except when his brother's concerned, he's usually in a very good mood, very happy. He tries to make you smile. He loves to goof off. If you have anything on that's not Ravens, he'll say you stink because your team stinks. Doesn't matter if it's not Orioles or Ravens, your team stinks, period. That's just the way it works. I've raised him right. No, I'm kidding. Maybe a little bit. So he's very much into being a jokester. He'll like to steal. If you have a baseball cap on, he wants to steal your hat. You know, he's just a very fun loving. If you're in a grumpy mood, he can pick up on it. He will do things to make you
laugh, which is awesome. That's such a great trait to have. What's the dynamic between John and Jake?
I would say it's the only thing typical in my household.
Yeah.
Is that sibling rivalry. I tell the story of when Jake was a little tiny baby, because they're 2.5 years apart.
Okay.
So Jake was like maybe 2-3 months old. So he was still rear facing. And back then you could turn forward facing at one. So John was forward facing. And I hear this, because I had a minivan from the back, Mom, Jake is staring at me. I'm like, child, he's 3 months. He probably can't even see you. And Jake is very flexible. As he got older, he was able to take his leg and kick his brother and get him, get him screaming. So I had to put them in different rows in the minivan so they couldn't see or touch each other.
Wait, did you have your skeleton in between the two of them, or no?
I did not have,
wasn't alive then.
Hector at that time. Hector was not around yet. Hector's a new addition to the household.
And I just have to want to interject that you can follow, what's his name?
Hector the Skeleton.
Hector the Skeleton on, don't you have a separate Instagram page?
He is on Instagram. It's Hector I think it's underscore skeleton. I'll look at it. You can send it out with the notes. I'll look at what it is. Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Back to
Jake
John.
Actually hates Skeleton. He's terrified of Hector, by the way. He hates him.
Oh my God.
Yes, it's kind of comical. Anyway, so then there was a time when I was at Townhouse and I was cooking dinner and I heard Jake scream. So I went, John, leave your brother alone. I didn't do nothing. Of course he didn't, right? I'm like, whatever. This went on for 7 minutes. I kept coming in and yelling at him. I'm like, just stop. So I figured, all right, I'm going to catch John in the action. So I just went behind the wall. I went back in the kitchen and then I heard Jake screaming. I peeked around and John wasn't even in the living room. Jake was screaming to get John in trouble.
Oh my gosh.
So that is that dynamic between the two.
Yeah. And if you would ask my sister would tell you the same thing about me, that I would try and get her in trouble. No, never.
And when John's in a grumpy mood, and with the anxiety and the Asperger's and stuff, if you get grumpy, they just go off. Jake knew how to push his buttons to push him over the edge. So the two of them start fights equally, and they're both just as typical brother. But they do love each other. They miss each other when they're not there. And so it's definitely the only normal thing.
Does John help with Jake? Is he willing to help him? Yes. And
yeah, he is my backup caregiver. He'll sit with Jake. They'll watch TV. He'll help me lift him and things because now John's taller than me. And so it's easier.
Yeah.
He will cath him. He will do his tube feed. He will set up the TPN, but he will not do the cecostomy. He won't change a diaper. And he won't start the TPN. He's not comfortable with that stuff yet.
Right. Well, kudos for him, because that's a lot,
Well, I have to tell you, the reason why he learned to cath Jake was because he got tired of waiting the long ladies' room lines while I had to go in the bathroom with Jake. So he learned to cath Jake so he could take him in the men's room and then we could be on our way faster.
I love it. Oh my.
So, hey, you learned, I'll take it.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about your experiences as a mom of two boys with different abilities. How old were your boys when you got divorced? And how did you manage both boys' work and being a single mom?
I'm not sure the second part, but I, I don't know how, I don't think I did all that well. So I've been divorced about 10 years. So Jake was 9 and John was what, 12?
Okay.
It was a very amicable divorce. It was we kind of talked about it off and on, and then we find like we don't know what else to do. We'll just separate. We're like, okay. I mean, I helped him find an apartment, so it was very amicable. We co-parent fairly well. At least I think so, which is important for the kids. My parents, it was a pretty nasty divorce, and I didn't want that for my kids. I'm like, you can talk about me all you want to your friends, just not in front of the kids.
Yep. That's how my mom always was.
Yeah. And that's kind of, and I think when they get older, they'll figure things out on their own and, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard on John the most, I think, because it was like his whole world was like, whoa, what the heck? And he went through I don't think that helped his middle school issues at all. And they kept trying to blame it on the divorce in middle school instead of his diagnoses. And that was a fight in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jake, he was very much a daddy's boy. So he just missed his dad every day, being there every day and that kind of thing. But he got the hang of it because he took him every other weekend and he could come by and say hi. Jake would call him on the phone, do video chat, since he's nonverbal. Obviously, we had to video chat, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, did you have a lot of support from friends and family? And did you have any outlets or hobbies or self-care routines that you could escape?
I mean, our family was around. I have a pretty big family.
I think, when people are divorced, the only good thing is that when they take the kids for a weekend, at least you have a weekend bereavement.
That was what I call them, my respite weekends. I still call them that because he still takes them. Because it's at my respite weekend. So that was nice. Mm-hmm. It was hard the first couple of times, like the first time he had them on Christmas Eve and I woke up with no kids in the house. That was really difficult.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of like, sweet, I can sleep in. It takes a little bit.
And there's so many people out there that are divorced or that where the father has nothing to do with them. I don't know how, honestly.
I don't understand that either. Yeah.
The moms deal with it and get through because it's a lot.
It is. I did have some family support that, some friends that would step in and watch John or Jake when I was doing things in the evening, whether it was work or school or those kind of things. So I wasn't in school at that point. I decided to go back afterwards because, I was crazy. That's, but it was difficult. It was very lonely because it was hard to go out and do anything because you had to find care for Jake. John could stay home for a little bit. Jake could not. And it was, like I said, families kind of spread. My dad lived in Florida. So that was Georgia and Florida. And then, so that he couldn't really come up and say, hey, let me, because he wasn't there. And then my aunts and all, I'm much older than my siblings and my generation of my family. Okay. Like my next sibling down is 13 years younger than me.
Oh, wow.
Same thing with my cousins. So we're at different life stages. So my aunts and I were still at that point, we're still busy raising their high school kids and teenage kids, and they were really busy. So it wasn't that they didn't want to, they were busy as well. So they supported when they could.
Right.
With different things.
And there was a lot to take care of him. Like, you can't mess around. You need to have someone you trust to take care of him.
Right. And I did. And I had my aunt's a nurse. So she was one of the primary ones that come over and help. There's an adult side, she's kind of like kids, but she got the hang and she was more comfortable, dealing with Jake because he didn't have all the stuff that he has now. Mm-hmm. Back then it was the tube feed. But
tell us how you got involved with all the different groups and the advisory boards and the councils. Because I know when I was involved with all the different ones when Faith was growing up, I found it to be therapeutic to be involved with them, because not only are you surrounding yourself with others that are going through the similar things, but you learn from the ones that came before you, and then you absorb all of that knowledge that you're, that you're learning so you can pass it on, which is why I love doing this show, because to me it's therapeutic, right? And I get to share all these amazing stories and resources with everybody, because now as the kids get older, you get less involved with a lot of things because you're growing with the needs of the child.
Exactly. And it all started back in the infant and toddlers. John was an infant and toddlers when Jake was born. And I think that's the only reason why Jake got in almost immediately, because his infant toddler teacher's like, he needs to get in now. And I think she pushed it forward. And then going through all the things with Jake, because he had more urgent needs, we got the diagnosis of Asperger sooner than I think we would have had anybody else not had another child. I think the two of them kind of helped each other in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember not finding hardly anything after. There really wasn't, if you didn't have a diagnosis of like Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy, it was hard to fit anywhere. And since neither one of my kids fit any of those categories, there really wasn't much out there, and there really wasn't anyone to help. And I loved research. Like I said, I'm a nerd. I admit it. So I loved doing research and finding all these things. And I had a binder, like, thick, full of resources in my area. So I got involved in just kind of reaching out to my infant toddler teacher could refer families to me, and we talk. Mm-hmm. And then once the kids got in school, I'm like, hey, I was a stay-at-home mom at that time, early on, because I couldn't work. It was too hard to work with Jake and all that. So I got onto the Citizens Advisory Committee, the SECAC, for the county we were in, and did some of that stuff. And then I moved on. I found like, the local ARC, or my local ARC was the ARC Baltimore. And I did some things through them. I found Parents Place. I took some training through there.
We took the same health leaders class. And I wonder if we did it. I have to go back and see when we got ours.
I think so, because mine was 2010, maybe 2009.
Yeah, and mine was younger than that, I think. Mine was
right. And then I was on their board briefly, and having that job, one of the people that was in there was Meredith. I don't know if you remember her. Mm-hmm. She's the one that had the opening, and from talking to me, figured I'd be the perfect person to be in that state job. And then it kind of scooted into there. And because my thought was, I had to find it. I was lucky and blessed enough to be able to have the time and the knowledge and the know-how to find all this stuff and understand the medical piece. Not every family is so lucky. So I wanted, like families before us paved the way. I wanted to make it even easier for the ones behind us.
Yep.
So I kind of went in and started all that stuff at the state and helped in that way of going out and doing talks to like Mount Washington, DDA, about what it was like to be a parent of a child with a differing ability, and to understand why sometimes we're scatterbrained or we forget the paperwork, or to understand the financial stress beyond deductibles, where other financial stressors are in there.
Yep.
And there's a ton.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never ending.
It's not.
So, and I had to laugh when I was reading your bio where it said that in your free time, you volunteer with your local fire department.
Yes.
My girl, but I don't know how you do it all. For one, not only do you work full time, take care of your kids, volunteer at the fire department, earn your master's, you're the vice president of the, how do you say it? Au-Kline Syndrome Foundation, and you found time to date, just recently bought a house and got engaged. So congratulations.
Thank you
for you.
Well, the fire department was pre-kid. So that was kind of one of those hobbies I held on to, as that people call it self-care. It sounds weird, but it kind of is. That was my pre-kid. I go there. I'm one of the guys. I'm not, I'm a mom with special needs.
Right.
Now here recently, I'll admit I've backed off and I'm more do administrative stuff on the board that I do actually going out and riding, because I'm getting a little older and it's not exactly physically, I ride the medic and I'm laid up for a couple of days because my bones and muscles aren't used to that. But
Oh, that's awesome though. How is the dynamic, with you and your fiance? Because I don't know what it's like for, like, I would think that it would be hard to find somebody or the right person to come in and then help you and understand the time that you have to put into your kid, and are they willing to help, and all those different dynamics. So how does your dynamics work?
It was difficult. We did find each other online on one of those dating, and I was kind of like, in the very beginning of the conversations, I would like, here's my kids, this is what's going on. Do you want to continue? Because I'm not going to invest if you're not going to.
Right.
He's like, all right, whatever. So he was very, okay about it. He's got a daughter from his previous, so she's much younger. So she's 5, and like, wow, a little girl. What do you do with a girl? I don't have.
You're not used to girls.
No, I'm not used to little girls. So that's like a whole kind of culture shock for me. And to go back to have a little one again, which is kind of cool. So he was really cool. He just, whatever you need to do, whatever, we need to do for Jake, and he pitches in, he helps. He's learned to cath him. He can make his tube feed. He helps me with, especially the physical lifting of it, that kind of stuff. And yeah,
that is so awesome.
I've been very blessed and lucky. I think it's, we sent my way for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you give others out there that are just now getting this diagnosis for their kiddos, or any diagnosis for that matter?
Take a moment to grieve if you need to. Don't try to hide. Just go ahead and just let it out. Maybe not right there in front of the kids, but take that moment to just be in that moment and be upset. Then pull up your panties, your big boy pants, whatever, and go for it and try to find as much information as you can. Google's not always the best thing, but you can look for search groups or like agencies or organizations that deal with whatever the diagnoses, and then get more information. Find other parents, because that's what it really is. Doctors can tell you one thing, but parents are going to tell you what it's really like.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you the tips and the tricks that doctors can't, and things like that.
Yep. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap things up and move on to part 2 of the episode about your role of the Arc Northern Chesapeake Region and what supports they offer?
I guess the biggest thing would be, if you know, even if you are a single parent or not a single parent, don't be afraid to ask for help. That was my biggest downfall, especially during the pandemic. I briefly took a different job in between the ARC and the state as a public health preparedness during the pandemic. Stupid. And it really took a toll on my mental health. I really had to take time off of the job and find something else. And I'm really big open on mental health, and it was pretty close to a breakdown because I didn't ask for help. I figured I could just do it all. You can't. It's no shame in asking for help. Yes, it's your child, but you still need help. It takes a village. Don't be afraid to. And that's the biggest, don't be afraid. And if you know somebody that has a differing ability child, whether they're a child, they'll always be children to me, whether they're young or they're an adult, don't just say, how can I help you? Because we're just so in the moment, so overwhelmed, making so many decisions. We don't know what to tell you. Just say, you know what? I'm free tomorrow night. What can I bring you for dinner? Or I got to go to the store. Can I pick you up a few groceries? Or, whatever, something like that. Or can I come over and whatever your specialty is? Or can I come over and watch your kid while you go take a nap? Something. And just offer and give them a hand, or just let them talk. Just let them vent to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's so needed.
That's great advice. Okay. And last but not least, I think I sent you the flyer, but anyway, yes, about what you're
I've listened to a few podcasts of yours. So I was already prepared for that. And I already know my word is hope.
It's hope. Okay.
And I actually have it tattooed. I don't know if I can see it on my wrist.
Why do I feel like I've never seen it? Is it new?
Nope. No. It's old.
It's old.
It's probably because it's on the underside. So unless I go, you wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
And it stands for hope is for so many things. You hope for the better future, but it also HOPE for me, because I have mine with dots in between. It's hold on, pain ends. So whatever pain you're going through, hold on, it will end and you'll come out the other side.
Oh.
And that's why I keep it on there as a reminder to myself.
I do remember you telling me that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember having that thing. I remember my mouth dropping, like, hold on, pain ends. Wow.
So that's my word. That's why I have it on there with the butterfly, is hold on, it ends and something beautiful can come from it.
Oh my gosh. OMG. I love. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing. So everybody, please stay tuned for the next episode on the Arc Northern Chesapeake Region, and have a great one. Bye. Thank you for joining us as we spread awareness through our personal stories and the many resources shared. You can help us by joining our village simply by sharing our show to the masses. If you would like to support the Guilbault Girls on another level, click on the link in the show notes to make a donation in any amount. Add your address and you'll receive a hand-stamped token with the word village on it in appreciation. Be sure to subscribe to our Guilbault Girls podcast and YouTube show, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Guilbault Girls. Till next time.